A new beginning in the woods. The cabin had been in Bobby's family for generations. Built by his uncle, it was a small, sturdy structure, worn by years of use but rich with history. Perched on the edge of a sprawling forest, it was surrounded by towering trees whose thick branches knitted together overhead to form a canopy that let only slivers of sunlight reach the forest floor. During the day, the cabin was embraced by the sounds of chirping birds, leaves rustling in the wind, and the faint hum of insects, a chorus of natural life that felt welcoming. But at night, the forest became something else entirely. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, shadows stretched out from the trees, merging into the thick blanket of darkness that surrounded the cabin. The towering oaks and pines became dark, looming figures against the inky sky, their branches creaking softly in the night breeze like whispering voices. The forest became silent, unnaturally silent. No wind, no insects, not even the distant call of a night owl. The only sounds came from the crackling of the fireplace and the faint, muffled breaths of the Ford family as they tried to sleep. Each night, Elizabeth lay in bed, her eyes drifting toward the window, feeling as if something unseen was lurking just beyond the trees, watching and waiting. It was a feeling she couldn't shake, though she tried to ignore it. Then came the claw marks. High up on the trees around the cabin, deep gouges that cut through bark as though carved by something with enormous claws. The sight sent a chill down her spine. She pointed them out to Bobby, but he brushed it off, assuring her it was just a bear. Yet each night, Elizabeth lay awake, listening, her unsettling omens. As the days passed, Elizabeth's unease grew, though she kept most of it to herself. She wasn't the only one to notice strange things around the cabin. Her sister-in-law, Patricia, had come by to help settle them in, and had felt it too. That sense of being watched, an almost oppressive presence that weighed down on them in the dark. By night, the thick air in the cabin seemed to trap even the faintest sounds. And in that silence, they began to hear low growls reverberating through the trees. The sounds were too deep and resonant to belong to any animal they knew. One evening, as the family sat in the small, warm living room with the only light coming from the dim glow of the fireplace, a rhythmic, heavy thud shattered the quiet. It wasn't the ordinary sounds of the forest or the settling of the cabin's old wooden beams. The sound was something else, deliberate, heavy. Bobby and Don both froze, exchanging tense glances as they tried to make sense of it. The thudding grew louder, each step slow and measured, drawing closer to the cabin. Elizabeth gripped Bobby's hand, feeling the weight of each thud reverberate through her, as though the sound carried a dark intention. The steps suddenly stopped, replaced by silence. Then came the scratching, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. Slow, deliberate, as if claws were raking across the wood with a careful touch. It circled the cabin, moving from one wall to the next, scraping in long, drawn-out strokes, and pausing every so often, as if listening, waiting. Elizabeth whispered, her voice barely audible, "It's not an animal, it's something else." Her words hung in the air, filling the small room with a sense of dread so heavy it felt almost tangible. Bobby's attempt at a reassuring smile fell flat, his own mind flickering back to the claw marks they'd seen earlier. A terrifying glimpse. That night, Elizabeth's fear grew unbearable. She could no longer resist the urge to know, to see what was out there. Slowly, she rose from her seat and crept toward the window, her movements careful, as if a single sound might draw whatever was outside even closer. She held her breath as she pressed her face against the cold glass, her eyes searching the darkness that cloaked the forest. The landscape outside was shrouded in shadows. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches swaying softly in the breeze, casting shifting patterns of blackness across the ground. Elizabeth's eyes darted from shadow to shadow, scanning the tree line. For a moment, all she saw was darkness, until something moved, a massive, shadowy figure slipping between the trees. Her heart stopped as she took in the creature's form, tall and impossibly broad. It stood on two legs, with a hulking frame covered in coarse dark fur that seemed to blend seamlessly into the night. Its powerful shoulders were hunched forward, and its eyes glinted in the dim light, glowing faintly as they fixed on her. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat as she tried to form words. "Bobby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's something out there. It's huge." Bobby and Don rushed to her side, and together they looked out the window. There, half hidden in shadow, the creature stared back at them, its massive form outlined against the dark forest. It took a slow, deliberate step forward, each movement unnervingly calm, as though it were sizing them up. Bobby and Don shared a grim look, and without a word, grabbed their rifles. They checked the doors, gave each other a nod, and then bolted out into the night, determined to confront whatever was lurking in the darkness. Confronting the Creature. The night was cold, and the silence of the forest felt suffocating. Bobby and Don moved cautiously, flashlights in hand, their beams casting long, shifting shadows across the ground. The trees around them loomed tall and menacing, their trunks like silent sentinels guarding the secrets of the night. Each breath they took seemed to hang in the air, visible in the cold as they moved further from the safety of the cabin. A faint rustling sound to their left made them turn, and there, just beyond the reach of their flashlights, they saw it. The creature standing tall and unflinching, its eyes glowing faintly as they reflected the light. The brothers froze, their hearts racing as they locked eyes with the thing that had haunted them from the shadows. Bobby and Don raised their rifles and fired, the sharp crack of gunfire shattering the silence. The sound echoed through the trees, yet the creature didn't move. It stood there motionless, as though the bullets were nothing more than whispers in the night. And then, just as silently as it had appeared, it turned and slipped back into the shadows, disappearing among the trees. They hurried back to the cabin, bolting the door and reassuring Elizabeth as best they could. But deep down they knew. The creature wasn't gone, it was just waiting. Relentless Pursuit. They had barely caught their breath before the scratching returned. This time, it was louder, more aggressive, as if the creature had become bolder, more determined. The sound moved from one window to another, circling the cabin like a predator stalking its prey. Elizabeth sat frozen, her heart pounding as each scratch seemed to grow closer, louder. And then, with a sudden crash, the sound of breaking glass filled the room. She screamed as an enormous fur-covered arm reached inside the cabin, its clawed fingers gripping the window frame, leaving deep, jagged gouges in the wood. Elizabeth rushed to him, her hands trembling as she took in his injuries, while Don double-checked the locks on the door. The sheriff's investigation. Shaken and desperate, the family called for help, and soon Sheriff Leslie Greer arrived with a team of deputies. The early morning mist clung to the ground as their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the cabin's walls, now marked with deep, jagged claw marks. The broken window, the scratches on the porch, the massive, three-toed footprints surrounding the cabin. It all spoke of something monstrous, something beyond their understanding. The sheriff and his deputies whispered among themselves, casting uneasy glances as they examined the scene. They took plaster molds of the footprints, noting the strange, distorted shape that looked almost human, yet larger and more unnatural. The media frenzy and the Legend of Boggy Creek. As news of the encounter spread, the once quiet town of Fouke became a hub of activity. Reporters, cryptozoologists, and thrill-seekers from across the state flooded the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature or uncover further evidence. Charles B. Pierce would eventually immortalize the family's experience in The Legend of Boggy Creek, a film that captured the horror and mystery of that night and brought the tale of the Fouke Monster to a national audience. The enduring mystery. Today, the forest around Boggy Creek remains as dark and silent as it was on that fateful night, its shadows stretching deep into the unknown. Locals say the woods still feel different, as though something unseen watches from the darkness, waiting. Sheriff Greer's plaster molds, the photos of claw marks, and the scars on Bobby's body remain as haunting reminders of an encounter that defies explanation. The Fouke Monster has never been caught, but the legends say it is still out there, lurking in the shadows, a silent reminder of the unknown that may yet walk among us. And there you have it, another mystery brewed to perfection. If you enjoyed sipping on today's tale, don't let the intrigue end here. Hit that subscribe button to keep your mug filled with new mysteries every week. Give this video a like if it got you thinking, and drop a comment below. What's your theory? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you've ever had a mysterious experience of your own, share it with us in the comments. Who knows, it might just be featured in our next brew. Until next time, keep your mugs warm and your minds open, because the truth is always brewing here on the Mystery Mug channel.